Good morning, guys. Welcome back. It's so good to see you all. I hope you have had all enjoyed your summer break. Now it's study time, guys. Let's study. I'm going to do a poem, Keeping Quiet, by Nefertari Ricardo Reyes Bacelto under his pen name Pablo Neruda. He was born in Chile. He had won the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1971. The poet speaks about the importance of quietude and calmness in our life, as it seems we all are caught up in the life, in the melee of life, rushing around for nothing, as we have a point to prove for, but to who? Instead of rushing around, we need to stop somewhere down the line and look within, introspect about where we are going wrong and how we are going wrong. Only then we might be able to come up with a solution for. And once it's done, it will be a different life altogether. Since life is meant to be lived for, objective is to lead a happy and content life. And what we all look in our life for, there are three things that we all of us look for in our life. Beginning with peace of mind. And once you achieve that, the next thing that you will be seeking for would be happiness. Once you have happiness, and the third thing that we all will be looking for is love. Being human beings, we all have a tendency to love and to be loved. And that's the objective. That's what we need to look for, rather than rushing around for nothing. Sometimes we do not have to really speak for the sake of speaking, even when we are not using any language, but still we use so much of gestures, gesticulation in order to prove a point, articulate about. And sometimes if you speak in a language, and if the person sitting next to you doesn't understand, he or she only feels neglected. Maybe he or she may suffer from a sense of alienation. And it also leads to a sense of friction. So it is better not to speak in a language that there could be the people who may not be able to understand us. But what is that language? That is called universal language, which everybody can understand. And that is the language of love and compassion. It is said, love and compassion is the language the visually challenged can see and deaf can hear. That's the kind of language we need to use rather than use a language that most of the people might not be able to understand for. What's the point? Now let's see the poem. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. The poet is saying through this particular stanza that let's count up to 12. And what will happen then? We will all be still. There will be a silence, a profound silence around. There is something called sound of silence. If you travel down to mountains and hills, stand on the edge, even if a stream is flowing maybe 15 or 10 kilometers down below, the sound can be heard about. And that's what we call sound of silence. It speaks so much. We do not have to speak in order to convey ourselves. We still can convey, speak with the language of silence. That's exactly what he is talking about here. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. So let's create an environment where we don't have to really speak for the sake of speaking. So there will be that unique language, the language of silence, quietude, calmness. And it will be so exotic, so wonderful. We might be able to connect with one another, communicate without having to speak, since we'll all be speaking, able to connect with the sound of silence. Let's stop for 1 second and move, not move our arms so much. We don't have to move. We do not have to articulate anything. Even if we do not do it, we still manage to speak, convey. Because we might be able to connect with one another. And that connection will be internal within. It would be an exotic moment without a rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Rush, hurrying about. Engines, machines. So, in case we can achieve that moment of silence, how wonderful, how resplendent and exotic it would be like. Try to imagine, try to visualize the whole thing, what I'm trying to tell you for. We don't have to rush around in order to finish the job. Or maybe to use machines to get the job done for. There will be no sound. We would all be together. And then in that moment of silence, we might be able to connect with one another. In a sudden strangeness, quietness, unfamiliar environment, situation, where we might be able to connect with one another through silence, that calmness, because that's what would be prevailing around all around. That's exactly what the poet is emphasizing upon here. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at his hard hands. Even the fishermen who are fishing out there in the deep seas, they're all so much busy and caught up with working, earning money, and forgotten about everything else. It's almost like we all have forgotten how to live. And they would not harm those wells. Neither the man who are working down there in the salt pit would be doing anything, but they are so busy in the process of earning money and working more and more for, they lose out, even they miss out to the opportunity, at the opportunity to look at their hands which are badly hurt for. And it can happen only when you might be able to still a moment in between to see and look around what is really happening. Only then you might be able to see that yes, your hands are badly hurt for. Those who prepare green wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. The poet is saying here, those who are busy in waging war, out of hatred to prove someone inferior because of their sense of arrogance and superiority, they are raging about all kind of wars. Green wars, environmental war. We are pulling down the trees, destroying the environment altogether. For what sake? Under the grab and disguise of development, growth. No, this is not how it is. And it shouldn't be either for. Wars with gases. Now we have all chemical weapons and weaponry. Chemical weapons of mass destruction. Wars with the fire. All different kind of sophisticated arms and weaponry are around for. Nuclear bomb, atom bomb, all kind of firearms are around. I hope you have had learned in your history lesson. Ashoka the Great won the war of Kalinga, but then at what cost? At the cost of 3 lakhs and more than people died, those who were innocent and they had nothing to do with the war or the battle that he had waged about to prove a point for. And that's when he realized it was all mindless, meaningless, no point for. And that's when he went down and take refuge at the feet of Lord Gautam Buddha. And you had also read about in the history mythological war, Battle of Kurukshetra. They had won, the Pandavas had definitely had won the battle, the war, but at what cost? They themselves had there were losses on either side. Hardly there was anyone who might be able to perform the last rites of those departed dead souls. So that's the kind of world we want to create for? Obviously not. At what cost? Even if we may have victory, win the battle or the war, but then there will be no one to celebrate and be a part of our joy and celebration for. Victory with no survivors. Put on clean clothes. So the poet is asking, let's stop these unnecessary wars, unmindful war. Let's put on clothes. When your conscience is clear, only then, symbolically, you will be wearing wonderful clean clothes. Otherwise, if your conscience is not clear, your consciousness is filled with guilt, then however you try and whatever clean clothes you might be able to wear, symbolically, you still are wearing those dirty clothes because your clothes, your hands are smudged with the blood of the innocent people that you had been responsible in killing for. And walk about their brothers in the shade doing nothing. Doing nothing is an art in itself. People all over the world investing their energy, money, and time to learn the art of doing nothing. Because all we are craving for, that happiness which is ever elusive, it cannot be found anywhere. It cannot be bought for with money. It has to be found within, which is why it is almost like ever elusive. As I suggested you, we all look for 3 things in our life. As with the advancement in science and technology and innovation, life has become more comfortable, more luxurious, therefore. But what we have lost in the process is also a sense of happiness, a sense of cessation, where we have failed to. We have now, in today's mobile age, mobile phone and all, it is said that we have connections in our contact list. We have number of people around, but what we have lost is the sense of connection. We fail to connect with. To connect with, you need to connect with people within, not with any other means or sources or resources. So, when you're able to do that, come clean out of war, you can keep them at bay, aside for, you don't have to get involved with, indulge in for. Only then you might be able to connect, relate with the people around. And then the poet is asking, let's hold the hands together. Because then we all will be able to connect with, relate to one another in a strangeness with a strange language of love and compassion. Then we can walk under a tree, enjoy that moment of calmness and quietude. That's exactly what is the point for. That's how it should be lived for. And that's what we all should be craving for. But at the same time, the poet hasn't had really suggested and advocated for any inactivity. He said life should be lived with a sense of purpose, being mindful about what we are doing, rather than engaging into something that doesn't really serve the purpose of humanity. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. Want no truck with death. if we were not so single minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing. Perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. The poet is saying here, he doesn't want any kind of inactivity. He has not been advocating inactivity. Inactivity also suggests death. But he is saying, be mindful, be purposeful about what we are doing without harming the interest of anyone else. In our process of more and more earning more and more, working more and more, we are harming the interest of others. That's exactly what he's trying to emphasize upon for, intended to. You work hard, you do your things, being purposeful about, but without harming the interest of anyone else around. What I want should not be confused with, misunderstood with, confused, misunderstood with total inactivity. As I suggested, inactivity could also suggest death, staying away from doing any productive work. No, we need to be purposeful, mindful about what we are doing, rather than pondering over sitting back and thinking about death and everything else. Either be a part of or how to create it for someone else for. I want no truck with death, Truck with death, association with, being obsessed with death, And once you might be able to do that, we all will able to do that kind of a thing. We won't have to engage in any kind of unnecessary friction, sense of alienation. So, if we are not so single-minded, as I suggested you, we all are sort of over obsessed with rushing around to achieve something. What for? Even if we manage to achieve bigger and greater things at the end of the day, who there will be to celebrate and be a part of our joy and moment of happiness? Because we might be having all the luxury and comfort in the world, but what we are missing out is that happiness, which seems to be ever elusive. Because happiness cannot be bought about from the market. It has to come from within. And that happiness comes from when we are in that state of frame of mind for. If we are not so single-minded, over-obsessed with one thing about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing. As I suggested you, we need to find that moment when we can sit back, introspect, look within, and try to look for what is that where we are going wrong for and why we are going wrong. And what is that even sometimes we are busy with our work and everything else, but sometimes we tend to forget that maybe our actions can harm someone else's interest. It may really rub someone on the wrong side of the shoulder also. It may hurt it may hurt someone's sentiments also. This is not how it is meant for. This is not how it had been objected for, decided about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing. Once you won't be doing anything. I'm not asking stay being inactive for. No. Be purposeful. Do what you are doing, the job that you have been assigned for. But without trying to prove anyone wrong or trying to take anyone else's share for. So then you might achieve a moment, come to a phase of life where there will be that silence, that calmness, that peace of mind. That's what we all crave for in life. Because as I suggested, doing nothing is an art in itself. People are trying to invent and invest in order to find out and in order to learn how to be sometime enjoy that moment of doing nothing for. Just simply sit somewhere or maybe stand somewhere and watch the wonderful magic happening around in front of. And who is that magician? The nature itself. She has been creating, unfolding this wonderful magic and miracles. But unfortunately, we fail to look at, appreciate, and enjoy because we so much are caught up in many of life. And which is why we fail to appreciate. And maybe note about, make a notice for. For once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence. When we would able to achieve that moment, there will be that profound silence, that calmness around, the sound of silence. And we might able to connect and communicate with one another just like that. Because then that connection will be internal. We do not have to use a mobile phone in order to connect with. That's exactly what we have been trying to do for. And in the process, we are getting alienated and making other just pushing away from. Might interrupt this sadness because we all are, at the end of the day, in spite of having all the comfort and luxury, what we are suffering from silently and quietly is that sadness. We all are looking for that ever elusive happiness. How to be happy for? How can we find? Because our entire energy and our intellect is engaged in doing something in order to harm others out of jealousy or hatred. What for? Might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves. Because we fail to understand ourselves, what is that that's making us so sad? Why can't we be happy? Because happiness cannot be had about with your money and everything else about. It has to come within. Until the time you are in the state of mind of peace, happiness cannot be there. And because of which, since both these two things are missing out, the third thing also is not there for the love. Because being human, we have a tendency to love and being loved, of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. So once we fail to understand ourselves, and there is that misunderstanding prevailing around, and that's only leads to nothing. Death, destruction, being away from one another. Because we fail to connect with. And connection cannot be had just like that. We need to connect with. And how to do it? Only with the language of, as I suggested earlier, only with the language of love and compassion. That is the only language that can create and help us create a bond. Bonding around with. And bond can happen. We can bond with others only with love and compassion, not by hatred or jealousy, not anything else with. Perhaps the earth can teach us when everything seems dead and later moves to be alive, proves to be alive. Now I will count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. Perhaps we can learn a wonderful lesson from the Mother Earth. She has been doing her things quietly and silently. She doesn't need anyone to tell her, remind her when to do and how to do and what to do for. She has been quietly doing her job just wonderfully well. And sometimes what happens, there are things that everything seems to be, when everything seems to be dead and quiet, but all of a sudden they come alive. That's exactly the kind of lesson we need to learn from the Mother Earth. That's exactly what she has been trying to teach us. As I suggested you, sometimes do not do anything. Be by the side of on your terrace and watch the magic of the nature unfolding in front of your eyes. And that's what we all are literally genuinely craving for, looking for, seeking out for. And once that happens, once we learn to appreciate that silence, come to that moment where we have that sense of silence, and then we would be able to also introspect, look within to find out what is wrong with, where are we going wrong for. And once it is done, the poet thinks that his job is done, since he has been able to teach us what he intended to, what he has been trying to have that moment of silence so that we might be able to connect and relate with one another. And now I will count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. Keep quiet, being silent, do not speak. Speak only through the language of silence and peace. Once that happens, that exotic moment would be around. It would be so resplendent. Believe you me, you might be able to connect with one another without having to speak a single word for. Thank you.